U.S. Supreme Court has ruled against Oklahoma in the Creek Nation case. For Gannett Media and the Oklahoman, I'm Dave Morris. Today was the last day for U.S. Supreme Court opinions this term. 3 cases were left, 2 involving President Trump and his financial records, but the other, whether half of Oklahoma is a Native American reservation. I'm joined by the Oklahoman's Chris Castile. Chris, good afternoon. What did the court rule today?
Well, Dave, this decision, major decision from the court today, very specifically applied to a convicted child rapist, a Native American who was tried and convicted in state court for some very heinous acts against a 4-year-old girl. More broadly, it involved whether the Creek Nation's reservation, the historical reservation that the Creeks were given when they were forcibly relocated to Oklahoma after the 1830s, actually was still in existence, whether it was ever officially dissolved by Congress, by the federal government. And the court ruled today in a narrow decision 5-4 that the Creek Reservation still exists, that it never was officially disestablished by Congress. And so this child rapist, Jim C. McGirt, was improperly tried in state court, should have been tried in federal court because his crime was committed within this historical Creek Nation.
Couple of things to unpack there, and you can see the Indian territory behind me right there that Chris is referring to. You mentioned Jim C. McGirt. Is it too early to say what happens now on that case with him?
His conviction was overturned, as was the conviction of a death row inmate, Patrick Murphy, convicted, I believe, for a murder in 1999, whose case had gone to the court previously, but they deadlocked on it. So actually, hundreds of cases were technically overturned today by this. Any major crime involving a Native American on Indian land, on what was once Indian land, was essentially overturned. If not officially, there will likely be hundreds of inmates that come forward now with new appeals.
That was kind of my next question, if we can dive into that. This case, as you mentioned, concerned the Muscogee Creek Nation, but the bigger picture also applies to the other members of the 5 tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole. What could result as this ruling regarding some of maybe Oklahoma's death sentences?
Well, the ones involving Native Americans that were tried in state court on land that was formerly, or it still is, reservations of the 5 tribes, which is most of eastern Oklahoma, we should say, Indian Territory. That forcible relocation, the Trail of Tears for the Cherokees, that is now most of eastern Oklahoma. So you're talking about hundreds of cases that involving Native Americans that have been improperly tried in state courts and will now be appealed. Some of them will be. I mean, that's one of the questions now. How many of these inmates would be qualified for new trials? They're Native Americans whose crimes were committed in eastern Oklahoma. How many will come forward? We'll find out. There's kind of conflicting opinions about that, but I don't know of any other death row inmates. There's been talk of other convicted murderers, but Murphy's the only death row inmate that I know of.
That's a good point. You can read the opinion. Justice Neil Gorsuch delivered the opinion today. You can read that on our website at oklahoman.com. He referenced what you're talking about, Chris, there, that while some may want to appeal, they may be in better shape right where they are right now versus appealing at the federal level. Gorsuch was joined by Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan on this. Dissenting was Chief Justice Roberts, as you noted in your article, Chris, Justices Alito and Kavanaugh. And then Justice Thomas joined in dissent in part and filed another dissent. And we also saw a joint statement from the state and the tribes. They released that saying the nations in the state are committed to ensuring that Jim C. McGirt, Patrick Murphy, and all other offenders face justice for the crimes for which they are accused. We have a shared commitment to maintaining public safety and long-term economic prosperity for the nations. In Oklahoma, we will continue our work, confident that we can accomplish more together than any of us could alone. Some analysis, Mr. Castile. Was this opinion expected?
It was. Once it's complicated, and I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds on this. Neil Gorsuch, who was the swing vote on this and is a Trump appointee from 2017, he recused himself from the first case, from the Murphy case, which was almost identical to the one. It was identical, you know, in the broader picture to the one that they decided today. The reason is because Murphy, when he was tried in Oklahoma, one of his appeals went to the 10th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in Denver. At the time, Gorsuch was on that court. Now, I don't think he heard the argument about whether the Creek Nation was ever, but he had been on the court when Murphy's appeal had gone through. And so he decided to recuse himself in that Murphy case. That left this kind of liberal versus conservative deadlock. So when Gorsuch, when they got this second case that didn't go through the 10th Circuit, the McGirt case decided today, actually had risen up through the Oklahoma appellate courts, Gorsuch could get on board, and allowed him to participate in this broader question of whether the Creek Nation had been terminated. And his history on the 10th Circuit, which of course gets a lot of Indian cases because of the states that are part of the 10th Circuit, his history on there was one of being sympathetic to the tribe's arguments about their sovereignty, about their jurisdiction. So it was assumed, it was expected that if it didn't go exactly the way it went today, which is a total rejection of the state of Oklahoma's case, that he would probably come down on the side with the liberal bloc. So, and we did get this statement today from the 5 tribes and the state, a joint statement from the Attorney General and leaders of the 5 tribes saying, hey, we're already working on this. We've been working on this. We hope to come up with an agreement that we can take to Congress, which has jurisdiction over all of this. And if they had been clear from the beginning, clear back in 1906, 1907, that they wanted to terminate these, we wouldn't be talking about this today, but they were not. So now they have a chance to weigh in. They're gonna, and it's gonna be tough there too. But supposedly they're working on the plan, 5 tribes in the state, to sort of avoid any kind of major disruptions that could, you know, arise out of this pretty far-reaching decision today. But that doesn't really get to what we were talking about a minute ago, Dave, which was all these prior cases. It's nothing that the tribes and the state want to talk about together about moving forward will have any impact on these inmates claiming that they were wrongly tried.
As always, great context from the Oklahoman's Chris Castile. You can find more coverage on our website at oklahoman.com. Be sure to follow Chris on Twitter. Lots of good stuff there. His Twitter handle, Castile Politics. I should say additional U.S. Supreme Court coverage can also be found throughout the USA Today network, including at usatoday.com. That'll do it for this segment. For Gannett Media and the Oklahoman, I'm Dave Morris.